Awesome. Wow, the lights are very bright up here. Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing this morning? Good morning. Nice, okay, good. I'm going to try to make this a little bit interactive. It's, Thursday morning, people are a little bit tired, so forgive me if I ask a couple of questions to the audience. My name is Thomas. I'm one of the founders of a security automation company called Tynes. We're an Irish security automation company, and we allow analysts, engineers to automate their repetitive manual tasks. My background, though, I spent 10 years working in SecOps. So I started in consulting, like many folks here. I worked in threat intelligence in eBay and PayPal for about 4 or 5 years, mostly on kind of large-scale attribution of organized criminal networks. And then I ran a security operations team in DocuSign, responsible for incident response, threat intel, e-discovery, fraud, forensics, pretty much everything on the security side of the house that's not compliance, like a whole lot of folks here. And while I was there, I was stressed, I was overwhelmed, had way too much work to do. We had a great team, but we just couldn't keep on top of everything. And so we started Tynes to be an automation platform and get rid of the problems that we had when we were working in information security. So the reason we started was because the life of a SOC analyst was too hard. Running a security operations team and a threat intel team was too hard. And I cared deeply about the problems that we wanted to solve. We felt that the tools weren't good enough, and it just made it too hard for the average person that's in this room. But that was 5 years ago. We're 150 people now, and we wanted to understand what the life of a security analyst and the lives of security teams and threat intel analysts were today. So we started by asking 1 or 2 people, and it was interesting. We got some good responses, and then we realized that unstructured data is terrible for making a business case for anything, so we tried to get some structured data. So we went out and we surveyed 500 people, and we asked them, what's the life of a SOC analyst, of a threat intel analyst like today? And yeah, we got some really, really interesting results. So this was at the start of this year. Things have changed a little bit in the economic environment, so some of the claims that we're making, the vast majority will still hold true. But there's also some around like job leaving that people may or may not be, or maybe less or more inclined to leave their jobs right now. But the plan for this report was obviously to understand what the life of a SOC analyst was, and to produce a really interesting research report that we could stand over, that other people could use to do things like, get more budget, or improve their processes, or improve the lives of the security analysts that we were. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. So who did we speak to? The vast majority of people we spoke to were in the US. Europeans don't like responding to surveys and giving out personal information as much as the US do. Shock, horror. But we spoke to, fortunately, about 55% male, 44% female, across a whole load of age groups, across a whole load of sizes of companies. We talked to a couple of people in the government. They also don't like responding to surveys and giving out information about their processes. Again, shock, horror. So the vast majority of people we talked to worked in industries like tech, manufacturing, healthcare, etc. But the results are very general and broad, and hopefully things that you'll be able to use to understand a little bit more about people's lives and make some business cases, hopefully, on what we're doing. So what I want to focus on today, then, I want to focus on, I suppose, some actionable takeaways that you can learn from this report, but also just give you 3 kind of really interesting things about the data. If you want, tynes.com/soc, the report's free, it's beautiful, there's some really nice metrics and things like that in there. But I'm going to focus on 3 interesting things that we talked about, or that we found from the survey. And then I've got some advice for security leaders in the room. Before I go into that, though, can I just get a quick show of hands? Who's a security analyst versus a leader? So who's an individual contributor here? Not too many. And who's a manager here? Okay, so probably more managers, and then there's about 40% of people who don't really know which they are. So that's okay. A lot of people are in that boat. Absolutely fine. All right. So the first thing I want to talk about is something that I actually found quite surprising. So we heard yesterday from Jake, from Mandy, and we heard from a lot of different people that the lives of security analysts are really hard. And it is. It's a really tough job. But the first thing was, we asked, how satisfied are security analysts with their jobs? The most interesting thing that I got from the entire survey was that 70% of analysts are actually really satisfied with their jobs. They say they're very satisfied. And a further 18% or so say they're somewhat satisfied with their jobs. Only a very small number, 12%, say they're not satisfied with their jobs. That's great. It means that people actually enjoy what they're doing. You can see the next question was, how engaged are you with their work? 70% say they're engaged, 20% somewhat engaged, only 12% again say not very engaged. That's really, really awesome. It means that the work that people are doing is fulfilling, it's worthwhile, and that they can actually get some value out of it. The next thing, and this is a trend, we're going to do this survey year after year, but a trend that I really liked, because I didn't feel this when I worked in the SOC, do you feel respected by your peers outside the SOC? The answer was 70% of people said they did feel respected by people outside the SOC. Certainly when I was working in a SOC, we were a little bit rash on some occasions. We butted heads with people in tech ops, with people in IT, and a lot of the time, I suppose, the relationships weren't as strong as they could be. It's kind of great to see that now the lives of security analysts, they enjoy what they're doing, they're satisfied, they're engaged, and more importantly, we can definitely do better, but there's definitely an increase in the respect for, I suppose, how the lives of, or how people working in the SOC are doing. Broadly speaking, does this vibe with what people would expect? I'm going to be asking a bunch of questions here. I've got some polls as well, which are going to be fun. Yeah? Okay. The next thing, though, this is the real bad news. People are burning out. So we heard this again yesterday from Jake and Mandy in the Crossing the Cyber SAD Gap. We asked analysts, do you feel burnt out at work? 47% say they feel very burnt out at work. That is damning and an indictment of our industry. To be honest, there was one or two things that I found really surprising yesterday. One, and Google are absolutely fab, but the idea that somebody for $1 trillion company that made $70 billion last quarter can feel burnt out, it's terrifying and really bad. That's not I've done it myself. I'm not criticizing Google there, but it's really bad that one of the most profitable companies in the world can feel that way. It's even more terrifying that 50% of people in the SOC in our industry feel burnt out, feel very burnt out, and 23% say they feel somewhat burnt out. Only less than 30% say they don't feel burnt out at work at all. The next thing, how is your workload currently? 60% say they have more work than ever. When we dove into this, we got a couple of different reasons, and I'll kind of highlight a bunch of those later on. But I suppose the most interesting part of that was that people felt as they were doing better in security, as they were able to detect more, they had more work to do. That's bad. The better you do, the more work you have to do, the more burnt out you get. That's not a repeatable cycle that you want to go into, and kind of just generally very worrying. And the last part, and again, I guess this is not super uncommon or not super surprising, but in your opinion, is the team understaffed? And we can see that 82% said they think their team is understaffed. Quick poll here: who thinks their team is understaffed? Okay. Who doesn't think their team is understaffed? One person. Any other takers? No. Okay. So this is again part of this is very much that it's really hard to hire good talent, but part of this is also that we're not treating our team right. We're not enabling them with the tools that they can get. Anyway, I suppose what we really wanted to do was we really wanted to dive into some of these questions, and we wanted to find out how bad the situation is. So this is the actual poll that I'm gonna ask. We asked security analysts, do you plan to change your job in the next 12 months? A, this is US. B, this is early 2022, so the results may have skewed a little bit, but I want to get a quick poll of people here. The first bucket that I'm going to ask is, who thinks less than 20% of people said they were going to leave their jobs? All right, nobody. That's terrifying. But next up, 20 to 40%. Who thinks between 20 and 40% of people said they were going to leave their jobs? Okay. A couple of, maybe that's about 20%. Who thinks between 40 and 60% of people? More. And who thinks above 60? Only one or two. Okay. Pretty terrifying. 2/3 of analysts said they expected to leave their jobs within the next 12 months, or almost 2/3. When we compare across industries in the average rate, so again, this is intend, not actually going to. I'm like doing big caveats here because I don't want to like shock anybody too much. But again, the average rate for every single job across the US, like both technical and non-technical, is about 25%. For tech in general, it's about 45%. So for security, saying it's 64% or 6 SOC analysts, that's genuinely really terrifying and a pretty just disappointing indictment of how we're doing as an industry. The next part about it is that, judging by this, every single person in this room knows this. That's so frustrating. We have to do better as an industry than knowing that we're not treating our staff right and that we're not treating the teams right. And again, based on the leaders in this room, hopefully we've got some takeaways, and hopefully we've got some takeaways that we can use for analysts in the room as well. All right. So these are the sort of things that I think are really interesting to I suppose dive into and understand a little bit more about. The first thing we did, we wanted to try to understand the pain that analysts feel. So we asked people, what is the biggest challenge that you face on a day-to-day basis? The biggest challenge they face on a day-to-day basis is being understaffed, that they just don't have enough people to do the work. That the majority said that, we've seen this in multiple reports, but that there's just way too much work to do and not enough people to do it. So it's not so much that the work is hard. The work is hard. Time spent on manual tasks is important. But you can see here that nobody's saying that the individual alerts are really hard. They're not saying that the tools they have to do the job aren't sufficient, even though there's an undercurrent there. The biggest challenge that they face, number one, being understaffed, and two, the amount of time they spend on manual tasks. The next thing is far more environment-based, so poor visibility into the environment. So things like they actually just can't detect alerts, and that's really frustrating. Or they don't actually have the necessary tools to do their job. The fourth one, poor processes. Again, pretty disappointing that we have this, but that people need to mature their processes. They need to figure out the correct way to respond to alerts. And the last one is that alert overload. What's interesting though is that people equate not so much if we ask people, I think everybody here what they think one of the biggest challenges is. A lot of people would say alert overload. People aren't necessarily saying that's the number one challenge. They're saying that actually some of these alerts are really important. They could be tuned. The biggest problem is that we're understaffed, so we don't have enough people to deal with them. And the second part is that we have manual processes to deal with them. So it's not necessarily that the alerts are really bad. In some cases, obviously they are. But it's more that in some cases, they don't have the people to deal with them, and the time spent dealing with every single alert is a big problem. Again, something that should be a little bit humbling for security leaders. The next question, and the percentages don't add up here because this was a multiple choice question. It took me a couple of minutes to figure that one out when I was reading the report. What are the most frustrating aspects of your work? So the last question, just to be clear, what's the biggest challenge? The next is, what's the most frustrating aspect? There are actually, a bunch of things in here that are similar. First, again, spending time on manual work is the most frustrating part. And if we go back to that burnout and the people that are really feeling the pain, very, very clear that manual work is something that's causing a problem. The second is high false positive rates, and the third is too many different consoles and tools to investigate incidents. This goes back to what I was talking about earlier. So earlier on, when I was talking about saying that the more tools we have, the more we have to respond to, that's this. The better we get at detecting, the more detections we have. And even if they're true positives, we actually have to detect them in 3 or 4 different tools and respond to them in 3 or 4 different tools. And that's really, really hard. You end up switching context, switching screens from A to B to C, trying to keep on top of all those alerts. The last two are kind of interesting as well. One, inaccurate or incomplete attribution. That means that the alerts that we're getting, we don't actually have the correct source for, and you have to kind of track them down. It's not necessarily we don't know that this is APT 24, 31, or Cozy Bear or whatever. It's more that that they don't actually have enough context for those alerts. And the last part then, and pretty common, slow or delayed log file ingestion and processing. So that's just waiting process when you're trying to investigate something, but you don't have the context behind it, and it takes too long. So again, though, all of this is they actually enjoy the work. when it's working properly. So the life of a SOC analyst, when it's working properly, when they're doing the job that they actually want to do, is actually pretty rewarding. It's just that they don't have the staff, the tools aren't necessarily tuned perfectly. There's actually way too many alerts to deal with. But the individual job of a security analyst is really, is still the same as it was when I was there. So the reason I left my job in the first place, we had too few people, too many repetitive manual tasks, and too many false positives. Unfortunately, that's still seems to be the case. So I want to dive in on one or two of these areas. We're an automation company. We're obviously going to talk about manual work. Fortunately or unfortunately, this slide is a little bit confusing. But we said earlier, it's clear that repetitive manual work is the biggest challenge. So we asked, how much time are people spending on tedious manual work? And the colors on the right, the colors represent the bands. So 23% of people, 23% of SOC analysts say they're spending more than 75% of their time on tedious manual work. A grand total of fast math, 64% say they're spending over half their time on tedious manual work. Again, that's not something that in 2022 we should be doing. We've got several incredibly powerful tools. We've got AI. We've got a lot of very sophisticated people in this room who know how to tune things. But the biggest challenge and frustration is that they're spending so much time on manual work. The next part about this is how much of their work could be automated. And again, 25% think over 75% of their jobs could be automated. I'd love to do that as well. Can anybody give me a rough percentage? Who thinks over, especially the analysts, the managers, I trust your job can't be automated. I really hope it can't be. But the analysts here, who thinks maybe over 50% of their job could be automated? Not too many. That's actually really good. And I think there's one or two folks over here. I think the reason is that a lot of the folks that are here, it's really positive. Your teams are being treated right, which is fab. But even still, whatever, 64% think over 50% of their jobs could be automated. There's quite possibly some shy people in the room that think their jobs could be automated, though. So we asked people, do you worry that automation will eliminate your job or your coworkers' time in the near future? 68% said yes. That's crazy. It's not necessarily the case that it's totally irrational, but we've just seen here that, about 40% of people here said their teams are completely understaffed. We know that a whole lot of teams are understaffed. Nobody said their teams are rightly are not looking for more people. But as a result, there's a big fear that automation will replace people's jobs. The phrase, the analogy I like to use in this scenario is, if, for example, if a hospital, if there was the emergency room, if they were told, hey, you don't actually need to record any patient data, that's all going to be recorded automatically, is it the case that the hospital will go out and fire 50% of their ER docs? The answer is absolutely not. It's the exact same with security analysts. We can put them to better use. So the next question, and this is another poll. So in the next 12 months, folks here, do you think your team will A, shrink, B, stay the same size, C, grow by less than 10%, or D, grow by more than 10%? So who thinks their team is going to shrink in the next year? No, nobody. Yet 70% of people fear automation. So I think that's going to eliminate their jobs. No teams here think that their teams are going to shrink. Who thinks their team is going to stay the same size in the next year? Okay, a couple of people. Who think it's going to grow a little bit? And who thinks it's going to grow by more than 10%? Wow, that's actually fab. Congratulations. That's not. I wasn't expecting quite as much as that. So the answer here is, we know we're understaffed. We know that people need more staff. We know that there's still too many alerts. We need to do something better. We need to do something a lot better. And I want to focus on one or two things that people say they would like to do, and then get to the takeaways. So the first question, or the next question that we asked was, we said, instead of manual work, if you were spending time, if it was completely automated, what would save you the most time? Number one, risk assessments. I can't tell you how much I hate doing risk assessments, but look, it's great that people would do that. The second, intelligence analysis. So we had a great talk from Patrick from Bosch yesterday about that kind of automated NLP analysis of threat intel reports. That's the sort of thing that if you were able to automate correctly, you'd be able to take away a huge amount of time. Threat hunting, I don't agree with that. I don't think you can automate threat hunting, but we'll put that aside. Like email phishing, attack surface management, vuln management, there's a whole lot of tasks that people are spending time on that they think should be automated or can be automated. However, really interesting, I thought we asked people, if you no longer had to do tedious manual tasks, what would you prefer to be doing? I thought the answer would be like threat hunting and reverse engineering malware and performing deep analysis of malware, getting attribution against like advanced persistent threats. The real fun stuff in security, right? No, analysts actually want to do a really good job at updating operational documentation, and they want to develop advanced detection rules, which is good. The next one, integrate more systems and logs, like research TTPs, like research and evaluate more tools. But people aren't crying out for more time to be like, I want to do the fun stuff. They're like, actually, we don't even have good documentation in place, and we need to do better. I want to develop better detection rules. I want to integrate more systems. So the sort of thing that like we should be encouraging people to do, rather than like crazy flights of fancy, this is actually really, really important stuff that analysts can be doing and spending their time doing. The next question that we asked, and I know I've got like a lot of different stats here, we said, what's going to be the most valuable skill a security analyst can have to help them succeed in the future? Number one, learning to code. And when we think about some of the results that we've seen previously, especially around like the amount of manual work that they're doing, it's quite clear that they think that learning to code is a way of elevating them and getting them up above that noise, getting them above that pain that they're feeling. The second, learning computer forensics techniques. I think this is things like reverse engineering malware as well. And the third, knowing how to operationalize the MITRE ATT&CK framework, which is fab, not something we've seen come up too much at this conference so far. But even still, 30% of people think learning to code is the number one thing that they can do to help them succeed in the future, which means that they think that, yeah, they're not adding value from that kind of tedious manual work. All right, I've shown you a lot of stats. I think this should be really humbling for people in the room. And it's certainly humbling for me to read it, but it's just for an industry. It's really, really, it's just disappointing, I suppose. Not exactly what you want to hear at the first thing on a Thursday morning. One, most analysts are burnt out. Two, there's still way too much manual work. And three, automation is a solution which is positive, but we still have a fear. A lot of people still fear automation and are threatened by it. So the question is, what can we do about it? Look, as we've seen in the report, or as I've shown you in these slides, like security teams are passionate and they're challenged. They're satisfied with their job. They actually enjoy the work when they're doing it, but they feel they're understaffed. They feel there's inefficient processes. There's way too many alerts. One of the things we can do, I've got three different takeaways here, which I'll finish up with. The first is make the actual work fun again. Security's like, it's a vocation. It's hard. There's a fly that's like buzzing around my head here. Security is a vocation. People will feel the need to go above and beyond, and that's absolutely fine to do. Like on that occasion that it actually happens. It could be Russia invading Ukraine and having to spend more time on that. That's totally understandable. But what we can't have is we can't have highly paid security analysts doing things like doing repetitive manual tasks, deduplicating alerts, copying and pasting IP addresses into 10 different tools, and then like creating your Jira tickets or creating your tickets in the Hive or adding data to MISP. That's not something that we can do consistently over and over again. That's mundane, and it leads to a huge amount of burnout. The fun part of security is doing some of that research, is doing like a little bit of attribution. It's being that detective. It's the reason why a lot of folks here got in the first place. It's high impact. It's using your brain. It's like, yeah, it's rewarding and it's very fun and it's worthwhile. What people in this room need to do is we need to design our teams, our tools, our processes around minimizing the bad and maximizing the good, minimizing the repetitive manual tasks, maximizing the actual benefit that, yeah, humans bring to the equation rather than computers bring to the equation. One of the examples that I have here is that analyzing like phishing emails is a pain, but actually analyzing phishing emails when you're doing a little bit of attribution at the same time, it's actually really good fun. So if you're just analyzing a mail saying, yeah, this is bad, that's not good. But if you're able to say something like, actually, this is Emotet, this is Hamster, this is TrickBot, or something like that, you're able to compare with some other folks online. You're able to identify those reports, and then more importantly, you're able to take that next step of saying, actually, the next, like going deeper in that kill chain, the next step is saying, Hamster use macro-enabled malware. What detections do we have for that? They always call out to a, api.ipfi.org or something like that. Like, what detections do we have for that? What detections do we have when it reaches out to the C2? Going that little bit deeper, it's not terribly hard, but like using that detective work, using your brain, and then saying, like, identifying those campaigns and figuring out who the bigger, like the people that are attacking us the most are, that's actually really good fun. But whereas analyzing an individual phishing email isn't. So make triage fun again is the number one. The number two, and again, this really, really kind of harks back to, I suppose, Jake's talk yesterday on, crossing the cyber SAD gap, but it's also the Freddie's talk on vanity metrics. We measure a lot of things in security. We measure mean time to detect, mean time to respond, our true positives, our false positives, the number of alerts, all that sort of stuff. But just as important to that, we have to measure our team performance and how they're performing, both in terms of analyzing results, but also in terms of, how they're performing individually as human beings. So one of the things that you can do is you can very much measure the amount of alerts assigned to one individual. So you'll notice this as well in your teams. There's usually one or two quote-unquote rock stars. That's actually really bad. They're a single point of failure, but more importantly, they're going to be the person that's diving in and is going to be burnt out by a huge amount of this work. That single point of failure means, if they leave, you're going to be in big trouble. The next thing we should be doing, though, is, and again, like encouraging people to take time off, but not just encouraging people to take time off. As Freddie said, once you define a metric, you have to measure it consistently and see does it improve. Saying, hey, we're taking time off, and if we're not taking time off, then we're going to force you to take time off, and then actually measure it and improve it. So who is taking time off? How much time are they taking? Are they actually checking their emails? Are we locking them out? That's going to be how you get rid of some of that burnout, encouraging people to take that time off themselves. The next part about that is, it's not just encouraging people to take time off, it's encouraging people to do projects that are outside of that repetitive manual processes. That's really important. The other things that you can really do, so consider like recurring employee surveys. What was really interesting, we spoke to 500 people, but we also asked them for some feedback afterwards. They all said that just answering these questions was actually quite cathartic. So no, they got some value out of just being asked, hey, are you enjoying your job? What are the most frustrating aspects? What are the most interesting aspects? What would you like to be doing? Asking those questions of your team is going to be really, really important. And the last part about it is, especially for all the leaders here, just check in with your team. Do those one-on-ones. It's not enough. It's not good enough to skip them. It's not good enough to say, hey, I'll send an email. I'll check in next week or something like that. You absolutely have to both continuously have them, but also measure that and improve it. Establish a baseline of how you're performing and how they're performing, and then continuously try to game it. Without that, you're not going to be able to treat your staff right, and more importantly, your staff are just going to churn. If 65% of people or 64% of people say they're going to leave, if you're not allowing analysts to do the work that they want to do, and you're not treating them right, they are going to leave, unfortunately. Last slide here. The last thing is that we know that the most frustrating part of being an analyst is manual work, but despite decades of hype, people are still not automating enough. So 1 in 4 analysts, 25% of analysts think over 75% of their job could be automated. And they spend over 75% of their time on that tedious manual work. It's crazy. That's just not something that we should be allowing in 2022. However, the last slide, or the last stat there, was that analysts, the number one thing they want to do, number one thing they think they're going to need to succeed in their career is learning to code. We need analysts. We need to empower analysts to do their job. That's analysts saying, you know what? If I am able to automate, if I'm able to get rid of this manual tasks, I can succeed and I can grow in my career. Engineers are perceived to displace analysts by building automation. So ultimately, we don't want any analysts doing that repetitive manual tasks. We want to elevate them. And the answer to that is automation. that's Tynes. Tynes is an automation platform. You can come and chat to me about it. But just in general, you should be looking at automation through any platform and making sure that your team are feeling right. So in conclusion, I don't think there's anything really surprising here, but it's just really, really interesting to have some stats around it. We've got a great report. It's all like pretty packaged up very nicely. So tynes.com/soc. So yeah, treat burnout as a KPI, invest in your team, and yeah, talk to your team, talk to your managers, and make sure that you're treating your staff right. Thank you. Awesome.
Thanks, Thomas. Thanks, Thomas, for the presentation. That's okay, man.
Yeah.
It was really insightful. I think I see some things that really struck with me. We have time for questions. Do we have any questions for Thomas? I mean, don't be shy, guys. We're here to learn and share experiences. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think my mic's off.
You can.
Oh yeah, sorry. So you have a ticket management system. So investigating the amount of time that people are spending on tickets, investigating the amount of time that people are like responding to tickets. So a good one is what percentage of time is an analyst spending on, is an analyst picking up tickets outside of their core working hours. So if they're 9 o'clock till 6 o'clock and they're picking up tickets at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, or 2 o'clock in the morning, you've got an analyst who's spending way too much time on tickets. If you've got an analyst that's responding to 20 tickets or 30 tickets in a day, you've got an analyst that's going to be burning out. Again, if you've got somebody that's picking up 60% of your tickets, you're going to be in trouble. If you're checking in with your analysts and saying, "Hey, what are you spending your time on?" and they just say tickets, you're going to be in trouble. The other thing is, just again, I think that survey part is actually really important. There's no scientific, "Hey, this is what happens to get you to burnout." It is just that repetitive process for it. It's burnout isn't one thing happens. Nobody minds if there's one incident. Everybody has P1s. Those incidents are brutal. I've been involved in plenty myself. But P1s aren't what lead to burnout. What leads to burnout is the consistent problem of noise or things not getting better. So that's a much more qualitative part, but very much measuring, measuring tickets, measuring the time, and then measuring their time off. If they're responding to tickets on weekends, or they consistently, been on the front line for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, they're going to be, they're not feeling the love, and they're not happy. Does that answer the question? Brilliant.
Any other question, guys? We still have time for one more question. Yeah.
No?
I can do something for you,
Yeah,
Tom.
please,
So
yeah.
I think you were based mostly on US security analysts, eh?
Yeah.
Do you think there's any kind of regional differences? I mean, if you do the same study in Europe or Asia Pacific?
Yeah, I think there probably will be, to be honest. I think I'm going to be controversial here. I don't think this crew are. In Europe, more generally, I don't think we're as sophisticated. So I think we're probably not catching as much. So I think there's a lot more. Again, if you look at the very first slide of the people that we surveyed, a lot of SOCs, you basically have to have a SOC. If you have a SOC, I think the results are going to be very, very similar. But if you don't, it's going to be a little bit harder. I think, I'd love to do the survey. I think in Europe we treat people a little bit better. There's working hours requirements in Germany, in France, where you're literally not allowed to do this. It's not to say that it doesn't happen, but the law is very much more on your side, so you kind of can't treat people quite as badly. That doesn't mean though that people are still finding it fulfilling. It just means they're not going to be working as crazy hours. The last part about it is I don't think yet in most security companies we have a good enough roadmap to get people from A to B to C. We still require a huge amount of experience to get to a level 1 SOC analyst, but not many teams, unless they're much bigger, have a good career roadmap to get to that next stage, and that's one of the leading causes of that churn again, that you're just spending time on the low level stuff without getting to do the higher level stuff. So we have to do better there. I'd love to do it. So.
I mean, for me, also a key takeaway from your talk is, be open within the team and discuss.
Yeah.
we face this kind of stuff and we don't speak up. So it's good to be open and have an open culture within the teams.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you.